Well, it's a myth that there is no private health care in Canada. Of course there is. For example, workers' compensation often pays cash to get workers to the front of the line. Makes sense. The longer a worker isn't working, the higher the cost. Prisoners also go to the front of the line, soldiers too. And of course, there's a line you can go to if you have a few extra bucks. Go to the United States, something famously done by Jean Chrétien when he flew to the Mayo Clinic. No Canadian waiting lists for him. Lots of politicians, and dare I say, lots of judges like private health care. The Shouldice Hernia Clinic in Ontario is one such example. But mere citizens, lowly members of the public, well, you get back to the public line, don't you know? That's the new ruling from the British Columbia Supreme Court. In the case of Dr. Brian Day, the founder of the Cambie Surgery Centre, that's been offering a free market alternative to British Columbians for more than 20 years. The judges there issued an 880-page ruling recently on Dr. Day's right to practice free market medicine. He joins us now via Skype from Vancouver. Dr. Day, what a pleasure to see you again.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Now tell me a little bit, when I first heard that this case was in the Supreme Court, I thought it was the Supreme Court of Canada. This is the BC Supreme Court, which I think is like the Court of Queen's Bench in Alberta or would have another name in other provinces. This is not a done deal yet. This still could go to 2 more appeals, am I right?
Oh, it's going to an appeal, and absolutely not. It's not a done deal. This is the first decision at the lower level of the 3 courts that you just alluded to. And we will remember the Quebec decision of 2005. That also lost at the lower court. I think it takes a strong, this was by a single judge, and it takes strength to take government as a judge. And I think that, you mentioned some groups that are exempt. To show you perhaps even more remarkably, the defendant in our trial is listed as the Attorney General of British Columbia. Well, that office has sent private pay patients to our clinic.
Huh.
And one of the attorneys general who was in office during this during the time that this litigation has been going on, had private paid for surgery himself at a private clinic in British Columbia. So we're very disappointed in the decision, where it will be appealed. This decision is causing a lot of harm already. We have cancelled all BC residents. So, for example, to kind of illustrate the Canada, in British Columbia, a resident of British Columbia is not allowed to use our clinic. So next week, I was supposed to do 7 surgeries on one day. I canceled 4 of those patients. 3 of them, the 4 that I canceled are from British Columbia. The 3 that I'm able to carry on and treat are Albertans. Huh. So you have rights in the province of British Columbia that the government denies to its own citizens. It does remind me of the former Soviet Union, where there were shops that only the tourists and visitors could enter. If you were a citizen, you were not allowed there.
Yeah, you know what? I am absolutely sure, without even checking, but perhaps we ought to check, that judges who are elite, who have connections, who have friends, who are wealthy, and who are generally aged, I am sure, without even checking, but I think we ought to do an investigation, that just as you say, the attorneys general of BC, who fight against you in court, use private services even at your own offices. I got to tell you, I bet the judges do too. I don't understand.
Well, you don't need to guess that or research it, Ezra, because I can tell you they have. I mean, we have received payments, the federal government, for judges being treated at our clinic.
Really?
Yes.
Well, How do they excuse that? I mean, I've been reading the other side's argument. They say that you're making too much money or that you're diverting the top talent out of the public system. I think, well, what's even more important than medical care? I suppose to eat. I mean, if you don't eat, in a few days you die. You don't need doctors all the time. And if we all were in line for, let's say, Subway sandwiches, I'm making an analogy here, bear with me, and we were all in a very, very, very long line for Subway sandwiches, and someone opened up a steakhouse next door, and wealthy folks said, I don't want to wait in line for Subway, I'm going to go to the steakhouse. Well, how does that make anyone in the Subway line any further behind? In fact, it empties out people from the public line. And by the way, when I'm saying one is like a Subway sandwiches and one is a steakhouse, I'm implying that the quality in the private center is so much more luxurious. I don't know if that's necessarily always the case. My point is, if you take people out of the public line and they're using their own money to get out of the public line, how on earth does that make anyone in the public line any farther behind?
Well, it's exactly analogous to education, right? And we don't ban private schools or private in Canada. And of course, if you send a child to a private school, you still pay your full share of public school. So one example, so actually, to me, that this is about patients suffering as a result of this decision. Already, as I said, we've cancelled all BC residents. Included in our cancellations this week are patients who were supposed to have biopsies and tests to see if they had cancers. Those patients now go on to a massive public waitlist. And one thing with the COVID pandemic, of course, is that these waitlists have gone up tremendously. There is a study out of McMaster that estimates COVID will cause times in Canada to rise by 4 to 7 times. Another more dramatic thing, since in evidence in our trial, which was uncontested evidence, this was, in one health region in British Columbia, 308 patients died in a single year on the wait list. They lived their life out waiting for a procedure, and extrapolated to when we began our case, extrapolated across Canada, that amounts to 75,000 patients have died on public wait lists in Canada since we started our litigation 11 years ago. Those, I mean, it sounds an awful thing to say, but that's the reality. That people, Canada said this in the Charlie case, patients are suffering and dying on wait lists, and they certainly are across the country, and more so in the wake of the COVID crisis.
That's an excerpt from my daily show, the Ezra Levant Show. Every day I do a monologue on the news of the day, then I interview an interesting guest, and then I read my hate mail. You gotta subscribe. Go to rebelnews.com.